Let me start with the cost of living crisis.
The cost of living crisis.
The cost of living in Australia is rising rapidly.
Now we move on to the cost of living crisis.
The cost of living crisis.
The global cost of living crisis.
Well, this is the worst cost of living crisis we've had for many decades.
Fueling a cost of living crisis in everything from energy to groceries.
It's worse than we thought.
For Kylie De Silva, teacher and mother of four, the cost of living is crippling.
Cost of living continues to bite.
In the last 12 months, the cost of living issue has jumped as the #1 concern for 1 in 4 Australians to 1 in 2.
Consumers are under pressure from the higher cost of living.
The increased cost of living have put enormous pressure on millions of Australians.
Victorian families facing a cost of living crunch are turning to public libraries to save money.
But if we think it's bad here, spare a thought for the suffering Brits.
Places like this reveal the reality of Britain's cost of living crisis.
The surveys showed the cost of living crisis is deepening.
The cost of living,
higher interest rates and the cost of living.
People on the lowest incomes, they cannot deal with this cost of living crisis.
Families struggling to cope with cost of living pressures.
Those suffering most from the cost of living crisis.
Food donations are surging as the cost of living crisis worsens.
We turn next to the higher cost of everything.
Queenslanders on the minimum wage can't even afford basic essentials. That's according to Anglicare's latest cost of living report.
Price gouging from major companies is now the biggest factor in the cost of living crisis.
The cost of living crisis.
With the cost of living crisis striking at all angles.
It's a cost of living crisis.
Australians are falling into extreme poverty because of cost of living pressures.
The UK businesses, they're struggling to battle with the issue of shoplifting.
From heaters to groceries and baby products.
Shoplifting reaches unprecedented levels amidst the nation's cost of living crisis.
Everyday Victorians are shoplifting to feed their families.
With many struggling with the cost of living, retailers fear crime is only going to get worse.
You have learned your lesson. Crime never pays. Singapore is rolling out a new 1.1 billion Sing dollar package to help its citizens cope with inflation and cost of living concerns.
From eggs to electricity, the cost of living crisis is hitting Queenslanders from all angles.
Well, I think Queensland is a great place to live.
The cost of living is catching up with the retail sector. Thousands of small businesses are under pressure.
Small businesses across the country are also stuffed.
And the expectation is insolvencies will continue to rise this year.
One solution to the rising cost of living is to take on a second job.
More Queenslanders are taking on multiple jobs in an attempt to beat the rising cost of living.
There are now close to 950,000 Aussies working multiple jobs.
The ATO says it will be cracking down on undeclared income, so if you are going to take on a side hustle, it's worth doing things by the book.
It's sad. All of these people are doomed and they don't even know it.
It is sad. Consumers haven't been this worried for this long in decades.
The perfect financial storm.
Some experts say much of this cost of living pain could have and should have been avoided.
We need to ask ourselves what kind of a society we've built that's got us to a stage where people working full-time in occupations that we need can't afford to put a roof over their family's head.
Do you expect it to get worse?
I do.